And we begin here with some breaking news. We have breaking news now on ABC News Live. I'm Kana Whitworth here in Los Angeles. The big four congressional leaders just emerging from this high-stakes meeting with President Biden at the White House to discuss his request for more than $100 billion in funding that would include additional U.S. aid for both Ukraine and Israel. ABC News senior White House correspondent Selena Wang and ABC News Jay O'Brien are joining us with the latest on this. So, Jay, let's start here with you. We know, we've been talking about it for a long time, that the president wants this funding for both Ukraine and Israel, but Republicans, what they want is to secure the southern border. And we heard separately from these congressional leaders. First, the Republicans came out, and Speaker Johnson, again, Jay, sort of laid out some of the more specific things that he wants, although, Jay, he continues to say he's not looking for comprehensive immigration reform here.
And that's key, Kana, because we're not quite sure then what Speaker Johnson wants and what he views as quote-unquote comprehensive immigration reform and what he just views as border security-based immigration reform, which he said he's more in favor of. And that's really important because for weeks there have been these ongoing negotiations in the Senate between Republicans, Democrats, and Biden administration officials as to what kinds of changes to U.S. immigration policy everybody could agree on to put into this supplemental aid package for aid for Israel and Ukraine and make that package passable with Republicans in both the House and the Senate who have demanded that there be some kind of immigration provision in that larger foreign aid package. So exactly what Mike Johnson wants and what's a deal breaker for Mike Johnson and what's a sweetener for Mike Johnson is really important in this, because if that package were to get written and get passed through the Senate, it would be up to Mike Johnson to put it on the House floor. And we didn't get much of an inkling from his remarks just there in front of the White House as to exactly where these talks are and if he heard anything in that meeting with the president that gives him a better sense of if this is legislation that he can get behind. And he could really be the spoiler in all this. He's actually returning right here to Capitol Hill moments from now, and we may be able to ask him some more questions as to exactly how that meeting went, get a better sense of where we are here.
Yeah, I hope that you are able to track him down there, Jay. And Selena, you're here with us. Let's go ahead and take a moment to listen to what Speaker Johnson said as he emerged from this meeting. And I want to reiterate before we listen to him that he brought up some things that we continue to hear from Republican leadership in terms of the border. He talked about, the Remain in Mexico policy. He talked about reinstating the catch and release policy and reforming what it means to seek asylum. So those are some of the things that he sort of listed off there. But again, we know that there's a lot more to it than that. So let's take a quick listen to what he said when he emerged from this meeting.
The House is ready to act, but the legislation has to solve the problem, and that's the critical point. We understand the necessity about Ukraine funding, and we want to say that the status quo is unacceptable.
So you heard, again, he said that again and again, that the status quo is unacceptable. And Selena, as we turn here to you, I see you nodding. You know, when those congressional leaders came out to talk, when Chuck Schumer took to the microphone alongside Hakeem Jeffries, we heard a little more optimism from this meeting, I would say, than we heard from Republicans. What do you think?
Well, it's clear that these big four leaders, they are not all on the same page. I was up on the Hill earlier, and some of these Senate Republican leaders, they were expressing some optimism as well. But again, that is in the Senate. It would also need to clear the House, and clearly they have different demands. And Speaker Johnson, he's already been pouring cold water over whatever bill comes out of the Senate. But look, Mitch McConnell, he said that he's urging Republican members to pass the supplemental because it's a unique time when they can extract some significant concessions from Democrats because they desperately want this aid to Ukraine, this foreign aid, and they are being tied together. So his message is, let's do it now. There's no better time to get what we want. But the question is, when it moves to the House, there are clearly still sticking points even in the Senate around asylum policy, around presidential parole. There are far more conservative members in the House that want far more stringent policy. So this could still drag out for a very long time. But we are seeing with this meeting today that the president convened. He is trying to get more personally involved in this, trying to move the ball forward. But again, this has already been stalled for months.
It certainly has been, and now we can go ahead and we can take a listen to some of the things that Chuck Schumer said. And again, as Selena points out there, he reiterated time and time again that a deal is only going to come, especially in terms of border policy, in a bipartisan way. So let's take a listen there.
That was essential we help Ukraine. We also talked about the border and how it's so important to deal with the border The president himself said over and over again that he is willing to move forward on border.
And so, Jay, I want to bring this back here to you, because one thing that we heard from Speaker Johnson when he emerged from this meeting was that, he said domestic sovereignty is also a concern for Americans, because they are having to react to the president saying, we need to fund Ukraine, we need to fund Israel. And he's saying, what about our domestic sovereignty? And one thing, Jay, I want to point out to you is that we heard from National Security spokesperson John Kirby earlier today saying that he thought in this meeting that President Biden might take this time to highlight to members of Congress what's really going on the battlefield there in Ukraine to try and create some urgency.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to tick through there, because you made some excellent points. First and foremost, I have breaking but disappointing news for you. Mike Johnson, my producer, is texting me from downstairs, is back in the building, and he didn't answer any questions. So we have no extra detail and no extra color of exactly what went on in that meeting. But to that question of talking about Ukraine and Mike Johnson's opinion of continued U.S. aid for Ukraine, when John Kirby said earlier that he believes the president would pull out classified information, as you noted, to try to demonstrate to these high-profile lawmakers the seriousness of the need for continued aid for Ukraine, that's really targeted almost directly and nearly exclusively at Mike Johnson. Every other congressional leader in that room has publicly said that they are very much in support of continued aid for Ukraine. Particularly Democrats, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, have said they don't want it tied to everything. Mitch McConnell, who I've been told that Ukraine aid he views as a central part of his legacy, has said that he's very much in support for continued aid for Ukraine, but also wants it tied into immigration reform. Mike Johnson's the only one that's been skeptical of aid for Ukraine. So those efforts to try to make sure that lawmakers understand the severity of this, they are very much directed at the speaker.
I'm very curious if we'll ever learn those details in that meeting. And again, Schumer saying that if we don't fund Ukraine, there could be devastating consequences for the United States, and we could find ourselves in a bad situation in a year. So we'll continue to watch as this develops. Selena and Jay, our thanks to both of you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.